Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Dynamics Fortnite Fridays.
Where we cover everything Dynamics great and small. Welcome to true Minnesota spring here, Bart.
It's starting to feel pretty good, huh?
Yeah. It was like around the world, you probably had it a lot earlier, but here it's pretty awesome. So
Yeah.
yeah, always pleasant. So,
So
do
with
you have a
that,
good Do you have a good dad joke for me?
always
Okay,
debatable,
okay,
always debatable.
not necessarily good. Okay, got it.
So along those lines, different times of year, sort of different flavors sort of kick in. So, what would you guess my favorite condiment this time of year is?
It's good. Relish. You got to relish the time, so I'm saying relish.
See, yeah, that
So
was a pretty good guess. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Mayo.
mayo.
It's May. Come on.
It's Mayo. Okay, Mayo. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. So okay,
See?
okay. And again, I'm reaching into the box.
All right.
Thank you,
What's the
Joe and Ann
card
Gutman,
say?
for giving this. Okay. Which bear is the most condescending? By the way, this is not a good joke.
The grizzly bear?
No, panda. Panda.
Panda bear?
Again,
No,
it's
I don't
panda.
know.
Duh,
Ooh,
duh, duh, it's
that
awful.
one's
Okay,
that one's
okay.
not.
Our content is infinitely better than anything that we're joking about today. So, what
For
do you got for
sure.
me today, Bart? Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start with a really nice update that has been put out by the Power Platform and Copilot Studio team. And I'm not sure why I'm starting to see those two things not be said in the same breath more often than seen in the same breath. But anyway, we have a new architecture center for Power Platform and Copilot Studio. And in this architecture center, you can learn about what we think the key things are to think about when just trying to have good architecture with these platforms, what some reference architectures look like, some ideas for various solutions, and lots of best practices guidance. So really nice to have this architecture center right out on learn.microsoft.com. Power Platform and the kind of DevOps concepts are getting more sophisticated. So we have had in preview for a little while in Power Platform the ability to connect either an entire environment or a specific solution up directly to Git, so that as you're developing things, you can kind of check them right into source control without having to package them up in the solution and have it be thrown out there by some other automation process. Just commit and do pull requests and other things directly from the maker portals. Well, that is now generally available, so use it in production workloads. Along with just being able to use it in production workloads, we now have the ability to not only connect, but disconnect. Kind of a major upgrade to be able to disconnect also. But being able to pick an existing solution and really large solutions without getting timeouts and errors, another big improvement now that we've gone GA. We can talk to public APIs, more object types, all kinds of good stuff. So take advantage. And one other thing is we are updating the schema, the pa.yaml files for Canvas apps, along with this to try to make them a lot cleaner than they used to be so that those diffs between versions of your Canvas app are much more straightforward and easy to read to actually see those diffs and what they actually mean. So lots of nice improvements coming in that sort of DevOps space. A lab has been put out. So we talked about Copilot Studio being able to talk to model context protocol servers in the last show. And there's now a really nice lab out here that allows you to just dive in. So you can click on this, it drops you into GitHub with a bunch of instructions on how to take whatever's on that GitHub site, deploy it to Azure, and connect up to it in Copilot Studio so that you can actually get jokes through Copilot Studio. And if I would have been able to make this work, it might have been an interesting way to try to get today's dad joke. The problem I've got is that the only place I have to deploy it in Azure is in such a protected spot that once I tried to deploy it, I just got error messages that I couldn't connect because it was disallowed by policy. So policy bit me. Anyway, hopefully I will find a way to deploy that someday and be able to take advantage. Hopefully you all have much better luck because your policy will allow it. Copilot Studio had quite a few announcements that came out in April, and so this is the really nice recap of those. We already talked about computer use. So computer use was something we talked about last show, where using a prompt, it can actually take control of a PC and just use the PC, kind of like RPA, but without having to program each step. There are some new graph connectors, and Copilot Studio can use all of those graph connectors. So if you decide that any of these services are something that you would like to connect up to the graph interface for the Microsoft Graph, so that they would show up in like SharePoint search, what we call Microsoft search, as well as something you can connect up to Copilot Studio to query those knowledge sources as knowledge. Nice updates there. Advanced approvals. So we talked about agent flows, I think, in the last show as being a new way to do declarative, sort of deterministic automations, much more like Power Automate would be, but do it in the context of the Copilot Studio interface with a different way to pay for the bill. Well, we are now getting an actual new capability that will only be in these agent flows and won't show up in the regular Power Automate cloud flows, at least for the short term. And these are advanced approvals. So advanced approvals have way more flexibility. They've got lots of built-in steps for almost like state machine things and for complex approvals that might require a lot of conditional branching and all kinds of other good stuff. So to take advantage of that, if you need complex approvals built, you can now use customer managed keys for a way more, well, I shouldn't say way more secure, but having more control over your own security keys in Power Platform. That now works with Copilot Studio. And Viva Insights, if you're using that to look at your ROI on regular M365 Copilot, well, now Copilot Studio agents can show up in Viva Insights as well to help understand what kind of return on investment you're getting for those. Generative orchestration, when you would turn that on, or using autonomous agents, used to prevent some of that stuff going on and those agents from showing up in the built-in analytics tab. Well, it all now shows up in the analytics tab to let those things be easier to get at the analytics for. So lots of really nice improvements in that platform that just came out. If you use the SQL connector in your Power Apps, which would typically be Canvas apps, but wouldn't have to be, we are turning on the ability for that SQL Server connector to allow service principal name-based connections that are also shareable. So this allows that to be an authentication choice that you can use that essentially gives that credential access to the SQL Server, so you don't have to have each user have their own set of permissions that are right for the SQL Server, which would even be a better way to do it, in my opinion. But if you have this as the preferred way for your use case, we can now let you connect to it and share that so that not every person has to have those SPN creds in order to be able to use it. So a nice step forward in security of SQL Server with Power Apps. Monitor. So Monitor is a capability that's been like in the Canvas Studio and the Model-Driven App Studio for a while, but it's gotten some updates. And the ability to see a lot of that stuff centralized in PPAC is kind of brand new and still in preview for a little bit longer, but we have done some nice new things recently to show more context and to dive into resource metrics over time and give you lots of things that you can do without like having to go hook up a live session in order to see things about your apps and your flows going on in Power Platform Admin Center. So nice to know that Monitor is still seeing some investment. Copilot Studio is about to have a new knowledge source lit up as of May 13th using Teams chat information as a knowledge source. So all the stuff that you collaborate about with the rest of your enterprise in Teams is about to light up as a knowledge source. So this is just the documentation on that. We don't really need to look at the details. Another thing that is coming soon is Agent Builder agents. Actually, as of today, this lights up. That Agent Builder agents is going to get rolled out to have a special dedicated environment in the Power Platform environment ecosystem for those to live in. They kind of live in Never Never Land right now, that they don't really show up in the default environment. They don't show up in a SharePoint site. I'm not actually sure where Agent Builder agents live, but now that they will be in a dedicated Power Platform environment, that will be easier to apply DLP rules, easier to give permissions for who can do things, that there's just lots of goodness that comes along with having them show up in a Power Platform environment. And this was created as the way to make that a better experience. All right, that's it for Power Platform. For customer engagement, there were 3 new agents that will have been announced in public preview for your customer service and contact center needs. There is a case management agent that will just help you resolve and manage your case workload when you are working on the case entities. There's a customer intent agent that will help look at the customer side of the communications through whatever channel that customer is communicating with your agent, your kind of representatives with. I'm trying to use the new language we talked about last show. And that your customer service representatives might want a little help in letting AI give your representative some insights into what it thinks the customer's intents are and kind of what their sentiment and some of those kind of things are. So that customer intent agent is also one of the things. And a knowledge management agent that's constantly looking at case resolutions, constantly looking at conversations, and trying to figure out, well, if there is no knowledge or the knowledge is stale that is being attempted for use in getting things done, that we want to either propose updates to existing knowledge or propose brand new knowledge articles for things that are coming up in your service needs, but don't yet have a good knowledge article built. And they will not only kind of detect that one is needed, but propose a first draft of one of those knowledge articles for you. So nice things. There's a lot more detail about all this in the rest of the article, but I'll let you read that at your convenience. If you use the field service module, there is some really nice new capability for Exchange direct integration with the field service module so that the bookings that you are making for those field service representatives in the field will show up on their Outlook and Teams calendars, and that sync will be one way from Dynamics to Exchange, so they couldn't make changes in Exchange and have that pushed back. You really wouldn't want that given the way field service works, but that the sync happens pretty efficiently and you don't have to do anything. It's just going to have work orders show up right on their regular Outlook calendar so that they could use it as their centralized calendar for everything, not just their personal stuff or meetings outside of the context of the work they have to do. So that's a nice new feature. In contact centers, one of the things that is absolutely critical is to figure out what your rules are for how to prioritize a new interaction that is coming into the contact center and balance it with all the interactions that are already sort of in queues and things in the contact center so that you can give that sort of tiered experience for your customers who, for whatever reason, have either bought in or that you have determined ought to be prioritized over other things. And that might be for a myriad of different reasons, but tiered service levels are one of those things that a lot of folks are wanting to do. And this advanced prioritization capability in our contact center lets you do just that and automatically put somebody as next in line or whatever else if that's what they either paid for or you decide you want to do. So lots of things inside of channels, support business priorities, look at your SLAs and see if that's a reason to prioritize. That there's all kinds of different reasons for this, but it's nice to see we're investing in making that easier for you to configure and prioritize. And we've got other things in the unified routing. So that's kind of this whole way of doing that routing, that we can now do least active people that are members of the queue, and whoever is the least active is the one that the thing goes to next instead of round robin or just capacity based or things like that. We can synchronize presence between services much more cleanly to match up with the contact center presence management capabilities. And some nice new shift-based routing with the workforce management capabilities and also some other things in workforce management that are coming up that I'll talk about next. But customized notifications if it's a returning chat because you've got the feature turned on for making sure that when someone calls back in, they get routed to the same representative that helped them the first time to try to keep that continuity going, that it would be a different notification coming in, and the ability to take the rule sets that help manage all of your routing rules and allow you to manage those in bulk so that you can have one change apply to a whole bunch of different routing rules all at one fell swoop. So lots of nice new contact center features there. So I talked a little bit about workforce management and what it would allow you to do for dynamic routing, but we also have a new thing coming up very, very shortly to use that workforce management capability to do way more sophisticated staffing planning for what you think you're going to need for staffing to adequately manage the load that is expected to come through your contact center. So that forecasting, short-term, long-term scenario analysis, just slicing and dicing the data and all that stuff is all here now, and capacity planning is lighting up very, very shortly. So pay attention to that if you're using it in the contact center space. And with that, Dan, I think that rounds out what I've got for the CE and Power Platform stack this fortnight.
So yeah, I actually have 2 lines to cover, but they're updates, so they're big. So I'm going to cover 10.0.44 in commerce and finance today. In 2 weeks, I'll probably have Max or maybe one of our other colleagues, Max, cover supply chain and Business Central and Project Ops and some other components. Because I'm going to be at my daughter's college graduation. My daughter Gabby is going to graduate from Purdue in biological engineering. So yeah, proud dad, right? So
Big
it's
public
either with
congrats on that. That's awesome.
yeah,
Congrats,
yeah,
Gabby.
that is us. Yeah,
I guess she
so
did most of the work there. So congrats to her more than you. Other
yeah, I
than
was
you
like,
might not have to pay any bills there anymore. So.
all I did was fund it, right? So she did all the hard work. But it's like it was either with my daughter or with you guys lost. So so anyways, let's talk about what's new in commerce. How's that? So let's start out with commerce. And there's a few features that we want to talk about. So first of all, there's Klarna support for physical stores in the commerce. So it's like, so for the brick and mortar, Klarna support. So it's like if you buy now, pay later, Klarna supports that with interest free. So that's integration into that, right? So naturally, we want our customers to be able to do that in kind of the layaway component. So that's the first thing in commerce. So there's also an optimized payment for or flows for loyalty payments, right? So it helps optimize that payment flow. There's a unified payment UI in it, right? And it helps the customers do this really easily with their loyalty cards. So that's the second thing in commerce. The third thing is for loyalty payments. So it's another thing about loyalty payments and point of sale. Allow you to upsell. So it'll inform you about like how many points do you have? Do you want to use those different points and their status of what there is? Like if they're like silver, how much more to go to gold, or some other options to help them help you generate some more revenue and utilize those points. There's also a health check for offline readiness. So what this does is like it's like if there's an offline, the first rule of commerce, and I've said this for years and years and years, so you probably heard me say this multiple times, is like no matter what, you take the sale on POS, whether it's online, offline, you just take the sale. So the offline is going to enable you to take a sale if you don't have the internet, right? So this just makes it easier for switching, right? And making sure that the database is synced, and if there's any like failures, that it updates you on that, right? So it makes it a lot smoother for that. Next thing is like we enable toast notifications for data sync failures, right? Or if there's like a bad offline installation, if it's not working right. So we enable that to proactively notify you if anything's offline, enable notifications of like if there's connectivity issues and give you some insights into that. And it just basically gives you that small toast notification pop-up that you may need to know. Also on POS, there's a new modern workflow in POS, right? So this is it's React-based controls on the transaction page. It allows inline actions for the transaction grids. You can monitor all that. Inline quantity updates for the transaction grid on that, and then of course the loyalty upsells that we just talked about. A couple other things on point of sale. So we also allow iOS extensibility, right? So if you have iOS devices and you want to extend the system to add a Power App or add something else within the PO system, we allow that, and so we allow that customization for that hardware in the for the Apple environments. So, and the last thing that's a big feature is like we involve allowed extensibility for the self checkout. So if you want to add things on the self checkout or just modify things on the self checkout, you can certainly do that now within retail. So really that's what's happening in retail or in commerce. We also have some updates in finance, and of course, there's a lot more. So this is a big one, right? So there's a lot in the finance for 10.0.44, and kind of think about this. It's like I can't believe we're at 10.0.44, because Bart, we started this before it was at 0. Does that mean we're getting old? So
I think that's guaranteed.
yeah, I think so. It went quick. So the first thing, there's a bunch of components on fixed assets. So the first thing is like the post inventory close to the fixed asset subledger, right after the PO invoices. So there's integration. If you purchase something from the purchase order and then you say this is a fixed asset and what type or what category it is, it will actually update those fixed assets. But if there's been some adjustments within that purchase order, it automatically adjusts an inventory close. You don't actually have to open that up and do that manually. It'll do it automatically. So that seems like a small thing, but a lot of people kind of forget about those type of things, or just makes it a whole lot easier to it. There's also within fixed assets, the budget depreciation proposal is running across multiple legal entities. So normally you'd have to run this on each legal entity. So you have multiple legal entities, you have to run on each one, including the consolidation company, so on and so forth. So this just allows us, it's just a badge. So we run it across all legal entities at one time. So it simplifies that fixed asset accountant's life quite a bit. We've also added financial tags to fixed assets. So I've been talking about financial tags for the last how many months? That we just started on general ledger, then we had an AR, AP, so on and so forth. But financial tags just makes it simpler to use, like slice and dice financial information instead of using dimensions, because dimensions themselves just take so much processing power, and that it's not non-performant. Financial tags, if we just tag that on there, you can actually slice and dice a whole lot easier. So we're kind of moving in that direction. And as I said over a year ago, that it would be like flowing down into everything, and it finally hit fixed assets itself. Now on asset leasing, so we actually have the asset leasing. Not that we lease out the assets, it's not a rental solution. Look out in the future, we may have something coming eventually, but this is for our for you as the company actually leasing something else. So now we have for sales tax group and the item group, we can actually put that on the lease. We'll make sure we pay the appropriate taxes, or and the pay to vendor components of that. So that's an asset leasing. We also have an option, so if you have that interaction with your vendors, right, and be able to cancel that lease termination. So users can revoke that termination proposal and cancel the lease. Also on the year-end close verification, so we have a status verification process, so we can check if that job is running. So if you're running the year-end close, it can be like really heavy in the calculations. So, and if it gets an error in there, sometimes it would actually just keep on running. You wouldn't know that. Now you can see this, like if actually the job is running, and see that there isn't an error in that, and then you can cancel that batch job. So again, just kind of one of those things that help you with any of those issues. Also, there's a review and missing settlement accounts. So this shows any ledger accounts that have ledger settlements that are missing from that settlement tab. So it actually puts it on the tab so you can see that. So just kind of simplifies the job to match those settlements. There's also been some bank transaction performance improvements onto that. So instead of having everything go all at once, we can actually set some filters on there to show only what the transactions that you really need to see on that, which will help the loading of that form itself. the banking transactions. Now on let's see, cash and bank management. So there's an AP settlement process on that, right? So we make sure that we automate the bank currency. Let me back up a little bit. So we enable the automation for bank currency evaluation. So it actually run that evaluation. We also added another thing. I'll talk about this in a second. That based upon the close date, we run that currency valuation based upon that date. So some companies actually run it. It's like, okay, the gain or loss for that currency valuation, and they do that at the end of the month. Maybe some companies do it daily, some run at the end of the month, but this allows you to do it based upon that transaction date with that. Also, there is a collection process on this. So automatically include project invoices for and general journals on that. So generally, like what we did was like just for regular sales orders, those are included for like the credit and collections. Now we're doing things for projects and general journals to include those, which was, I'm not sure if that was an oversight, but it's clearly something that we needed to do. Also on credit collections, it's like I include the general journals I just talked about in the collection process and that interest payments for that. Also on accounts receivable, so the prepayment invoice feature is enabled. So what this allows is to streamline the whole process. So it's like if you put money down, so especially like heavy equipment and it costs $1 million, you can put $100,000 down. Make sure that we have that for the invoice process to make it a whole lot easier instead of having to manually adjust that on that process. So on subscription billing, we are there was a before it was like a line base, so it's like each different line. We'd see what the subscription is on that. It's like going to calculate and actually take a lot of processing power. Now we're doing it by group. So if there's like a group of things, if it's hours and time and something else for this maybe for this asset that we're actually subscription billing in, it'll actually do that calculation. So it's actually much more performant on that. There's also performance improvements on consumption or quantity billing. So it's like, so for instance, like if it's the number of hours used, they get some from IoT telemetry from a piece of equipment that might be by quantity or consumption based upon that. There's some performance issues that we cleaned up on that. We also added a cleanup for the free text invoice. So for temporary data that's stored in these free text invoices that a lot of people actually won't clean up, we're just going to clean that up for you on a batch basis. So basically doesn't pollute your database. A few more things on for feature updates. Like so they're on Modern Bank Rec. So we actually reviewing this by account segment, account ID from and to date to make sure that we don't have any import duplication. So it checks on that for more performant data matching. And then on customer and vendor netting, right? It's like the ARAP netting of what it is. So we actually have a view for for any history that we had with those customers and vendors, and to make sure that we have transparency to be able to view that of what that netting is. One thing you need to be aware of about a deprecation. So we're deprecating the customer collections measurement, and that's the V1. There's a V2 and a V3. It's been replaced by V3 on this, but the V1 is being deprecated. Now, why that's important, so if you've done any reporting with that V1 or did any Power Apps or made any customizations, just realize that that's gone. This is like it's been around for a while. It's been replaced by the V3 and the V2 for a couple of years, but we're getting rid of that, and you don't want to have issues if that's an issue. We're also made some updates to the intercompany credit management. So if it's an intercompany transaction, I mean, are you actually doing credit checks within your own subdivision or own intercompany? Probably not. So we're excluding that from credit and collections management Again, that'll help with performance, and also it's unnecessary. And the last thing that I have is prepayment customer invoice feature. So this gives you more control over the customer prepayment process and transparency of those processes, which I kind of talked a little bit about before. But then again, there's quite a few features that we've had within finance. Again, this is one of the major releases. This is going to be updated, available in 10.0.44. So this is all I have for this session, Bart. It looks like we actually made it within 30 minutes. Can't believe it. We haven't done that in a while.
Helps when we don't have 2 fortnights worth of news, right?
That's right. That's right. So
well, that's
as
awesome.
always, yep. Okay, go ahead, Bart.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So I'm looking forward to working with Max next fortnight. I hope you have a great time out in Indiana, and we will see you in about a month, I guess. And yep. Everybody, hope you have a great couple of weeks. We'll see you online in a fortnight.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. All right, Bart, have a great weekend in your garden.